Hi, my name is Christian Guzman, and today I'll be presenting on the topic of views of war as illustrated in poetry. For this presentation, I chose two poets, Langston Hughes, who is considered a past poet, and Joy Harjo, who is a present poet. Both of them write about war, but from very different angles, and I think that contrast is what makes this presentation interesting. So let's go ahead and get started. The first poet I chose is Langston Hughes. Hughes was an African American poet who lived from 1902 to 1967. He was one of the leading voices of the Harlem Renaissance, which was a cultural movement in the early 1900s where black artists, writers, and musicians were creating work that pushed back against racism and celebrated black identity. What's really important to understand about Hughes is that he lived under Jim Crow laws, meaning segregation was legal and black Americans were treated as second class citizens in their own country. He wrote a lot about racial injustices, and that background is going to be really important when we take a look at his poem. The poem I chose by Langston Hughes is called Will Vitae Be Me Day 2, and it was written in 1943, right in the middle of World War II. It goes like this. Over there, World War II. Dear fellow Americans, I write this letter hoping times will be better when this war is through. I'm a tan-skinned Yank driving a tank. I ask, will V-Day be me day too? I wear a U.S. uniform. I've done the enemy much harm. I've driven back the Germans and the Japs, from Burma to the Rhine. On every battle line, I've dropped defeat into the fascist laps. I'm a Negro American out to defend my land. Army, Navy, Air Corps. I am there. I take munitions through. I fight or stevedore too. I face death the same as you do, everywhere. I've seen my body lying where he fell. I've watched him dying. I promised him that I would try to make our land a land where his son could be a man, and there'd be no Jim Crow birds left in our sky. So this is what I want to know. When we see victories glow, will you still let old Jim Crow hold me back? When all those foreign folks who've waited, Italian, Chinese, Danes, are liberated, will I still be ill-fated because I'm black? Here in my own, my native land, will the Jim Crow law still stand? Will Dixie lynch me still when I return? Or will you comrades in arms from factories and farms have learned what this war was fought for us to learn? When I take off my uniform, will I be safe from harm? Or will you do me as the Germans did the Jews? When I've helped this world to save, shall I still be color slave too? Or will victory change your antiquated views? You can say I didn't fight to smash the fascist might. You can't say I wasn't with you in each battle, as a soldier and as a friend. When this war comes to an end, will you herd me in a Jim Crow car like cattle? Or will you stand up like a man at home and take your stand for democracy? That's all I ask. When we lay the guns away to celebrate our victory's day, will V-Day be me day too? That's what I want to know. Sincerely, G.I. Joe. This poem connects to the topic of views of war in a really powerful way because Hughes isn't just writing about war on a battlefield. He's writing about what war means for someone who's being asked to fight for a country that doesn't even fully treat them as equal. He's questioning the purpose of war and whether the people sacrificing their lives will actually benefit from the victories they're fighting for. The poem shows us that war isn't just something that happens overseas or in other countries. It also shows that contradiction and the injustices happening right here at home. That's what makes this poem such a good poem and a good example of how poetry can show us a side of war that isn't usually talked about in history books or in school. The second poet I chose is Joy Harjo. Harjo is a Native American poet and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. She actually made history by becoming the first Native American to serve as the United States Poet Laureate, which she held from 2019 to 2022. Her work focuses a lot on survival, displacement, and the generational trauma that her people have experienced. And when I say generational trauma, I mean the idea that the pain and suffering caused by historical events gets passed down through families over time. That context is going to be really important when we get into her poem because her view of war is very different from what most people picture when they think of war. The poem I chose by Joy Harjo is called How to Write a Poem in a Time of War, and it was published in 2017 in Poetry Magazine. It goes like this. You can't just begin anywhere. It's a wreck. Shrapnel in the eye of a house. A row of houses. There's a rat scrambling from light with flashy trash in its mouth. A baby strapped to its mother's back cut loose. Soldiers crawl the city, the river, the town, the village, the bedroom, our kitchen. They eat everything, or burn it. They kill what they cannot take. They rape. What they cannot kill, they take. Rumors fall like rain, like bombs, like mother and father tears swallowed for restless peace. like a sunset slanting toward a moonless midnight, like a train blown free of its destination, like a seed fallen where there is no chance of trees or any place for birds to live. No, start here. Deer peer from the edge of the woods. We used to see woodpeckers the size of the sun, redbirds, and were greeted by chickadees with their good morning songs. We'd started to cook outside, slippery with dew and laughter. Ah, those smoky, sweet sunrises. We tried to pretend war wasn't going to happen until they began building their houses all around us and demanding more. They started teaching our children their God's story, a story in which we'd always be slaves. No, not here. You can't just begin here. This is memory shredded because it is impossible to hold by words. Even poetry. These memories were left here with the trees. The torn pocket of your daughter's hand sewn dress, the sash, the lace, the baby's delicately bedded moccasin, still connected to the foot. A young man's note of promise to his beloved. No, this is not the best place to begin. Everyone was asleep despite the distant bombs. Terror had become the familiar stranger. Our beloved twin girls curled up in their nightgowns next to their father and me. If we begin here, none of us will make it to the end of the poem. Someone has to make it out alive, sang a grandfather to his grandson, his granddaughter, as he blew his most powerful song into the hearts of the children. There it would be hidden from the soldiers who would take them miles, rivers, mountains from the novel core place of their origin. He knew one day, a far day, the children would return, generations later, over slick highways constructed over the old trails through walls of laws meant to hamper or destroy, over the libraries of the ancestors in the winds, born in stones. His song brings us to his home place in these smoky hills. Begin here. What Harj is doing in this poem is describing war not as something happening in foreign countries, but as something that was brought directly to her people's land. She's writing about the colonization of Native Americans as an act of war, one that didn't end with peace, with a peace treaty, but continued through generations of displacement and erasure. This poem relates to the topic of use of war in a way that I didn't expect going into this project. Most of the time, when I think about war, I think about soldiers, battles, and countries fighting each other, but Harjo is showing us a different kind of war, and one that was fought on American soil against Native American people, and one that in many ways never really ended. Her poem gives us a view of war through the lens of survival and loss, and it challenges us to think more broadly about what war actually is and who it affects. Just like Hughes, she's using poetry to show us a side of war that isn't always part of the mainstream conversation. Before I did any research on Langston Hughes, I read Will V-Day Be Me Day too, and honestly I thought it was written from the perspective of a fictional soldier. I assumed Hughes was just imagining what a soldier might be feeling and writing from that point of view. It was a good poem, but I didn't find it to be very personal just yet. It felt more like a creative exercise than something rooted in real experience. After researching Hughes and learning more about his life, my whole interpretation of his poem changed. Finding out that he had actually lived through this era and that he was a black man in America during World War II, watching black soldiers go off to fight for freedoms they didn't even have at home made the poem feel completely different. It wasn't a fictional soldier anymore, it was Hughes himself. And when you read it with that in mind, you can feel the fear and the frustration in every single line. It hits a lot harder the second time around. Before researching Joy Harjo, I read her poem and thought it was interesting, but it felt more like it was written from the outside looking in, like someone was observing war from a distance. I couldn't quite connect the poet to the poem, and because of that, it felt a little more abstract to me. I appreciated the imagery, but I didn't fully understand what she was trying to say. After learning about who Joy Harjo is and where she comes from, the poem completely transformed for me. Knowing that she's Muskogee Creek Nation and that her people experienced war, forest removal, and cultural erasure firsthand made the poem feel more like a diary entry and it stopped feeling like a political statement. And it started feeling more personal and exhausted, like someone who's been carrying the weight of war their whole life and is just tired of it. Reading it a second time with that context felt like I was actually listening to her and not just reading words of a page. That was my presentation of Views of War as illustrated in poetry. Thank you for watching, and thank you for your time.